you so much for waking up with me on Up with India. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe that the new year is fast approaching, everyone. We are already in December. And of course, I'm bringing you guys the best episodes that I can in this last month of the year. Thank you again, like I said, for waking up with me, because today I will be joined by a very special guest, Victoria Roland, host of Unseen, the Trafficked Truth podcast. She joins me to discuss how she uses her past experiences and platform to serve survivors and victims of sex trafficking. This is a very serious conversation, and I'm definitely looking forward to diving into it with Victoria. According to her, Unseen, the podcast, fills the gap between the commercial success and mainstream gaze of blockbuster films like Taken, or the headlines of Jeffrey Epstein, to shed light on stories that more fully represent a thriving community of survivors. As the program coordinator and supervisor for the only commercial sexual exploitation of children and sex trafficking shelter for minors in Hawaii, Victoria understands personally and professionally the strong correlation between survivors being heard, seen, and believed in their journey towards healing. This is going to be a powerful episode. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Victoria, for joining me.
Hi, thank you. Whew, I almost got teary-eyed in that introduction because I just can't believe where I am here right now.
Yeah. And what is that, 15 years later?
15 years later, and it's taking off. And just like you mentioned, I'm here in Hawaii and I'm serving the very population that I was able to really evade. I wasn't, suspect to it because of the, I guess you gotta hear my story, y'all. So we gotta talk about this. We gotta talk about the podcast because my story's on the podcast.
Oh, for sure. That's exactly where I got to learn about your story. Of course, I introduced you as the stranger, but it's of no surprise, I do know her. We met a few years ago.
Yes.
I got to meet you in the community doing great work, working alongside a person like Maria Beauchamp with Delaware Fashion Week. And that was when we first met. But really digging into your story was through the podcast. So let's kind of just start there, right?
Yes.
In that first episode, you dropped the bomb, you introduce who you are and what your story is. Let's take the time to briefly do that here.
Yes. So I like that you sort of introduced the fact that I was helping with Delaware Fashion Week, right? So fast forward, I was living in Miami and I was still kind of doing that same work back then, also around 2005. Another advantage of this story and our connection is that I am a Delaware State University graduate as well. So after I graduated, the successes that bring you along and like where your journey is going to be, I relocated to Miami, Florida to reside with my auntie and uncle. Yeah. So I still had connections with college friends. Sometimes you just, the life doesn't leave you, right? So just because I'm in Miami doesn't mean I've developed the friendships and everything and connections that you think you should have.
Right.
So fast forward, I'm still getting into the castings. I'm still doing, this is where I started actually, working with fashion shows and doing all of the kind of recruitment in that industry. So I was hit up from a friend that was also a graduate of Delaware State University, which I called him my friend. And pretty much at the end of the day, he set me up. He was a recruiter in a sense where in the trafficking realm, there is a crime against a person where you are trying to exploit them, recruit them, you provide transportation for them, or you harbor them to gain this person as potentially a sex slave.
Wow.
So that's what happened in a long roundabout way. You guys got to check out the show because the episode. You got to check out the episode because that was my first time publicly also sharing that 15 years later on the strength that I've been working at the center. I've been managing it for 2 years, and it took one more staff and one more youth to say, what is your story? Why do you believe in us? Why do you want to help us? Why do you care?
So much.
And I remember the day I was able to escape the moment I escaped, which I had a old acquaintance. He also was a male graduate of Dell State. He's the one who rescued me that night. And that's also another episode. But I remember praying and saying, God, if you get me out of this, I will do everything in my power to help and protect others so they don't become a victim of this trafficking. So in 2005, 2006, this was not a big thing.
Right.
There was no Taken, there was no Jeffrey Epstein cases. There wasn't these, sort of what people would say right now is like a pimp and a hoe. And I hate to say it that way, but when you are, forced into this, it's slavery. It's sex slavery. It's not a prostitute working on a strip or on a trail. And that's the intent that I was tricked into getting into. I was planned to go to Vegas the very next day and work the Vegas strips.
And you guys definitely have to tune into the podcast and listen to the full story to really get a grasp of what Victoria is talking about. But for people that this is their first time hearing those words, human trafficking, what
Yes.
exactly is that, Victoria? Educate.
Yes. Yes. I wanted to tell everyone, first and foremost, human trafficking is what people would similar or like associate with drug trafficking. So people would associate this with drug trafficking because people can automatically think there's a product, there's something for sale, and it's mobile. In the sense of human trafficking, there's labor trafficking and there's sex trafficking. I work with the population because I'm a survivor and I have lived experiences in sex trafficking. So sex trafficking is where you have someone who wants to recruit you to sell you. You have the person who takes you to sell you. You have someone where a lot of people are familiar with, want to pimp you for the gain of money, any other means of exploitation. So we get into the term CSEC. So CSEC is the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So in any facet of an exchange of something sexual, like it could be photos, it could be oral sex, it could be rape, or what sense someone's gaining something on the other end of it, whether it's, oh, you want to stay with me tonight? That's not going to be for free. So that's the exchange of sex. Oh, you wanted a meal? What are you going to do for me? I've been in correspondence with a lot of teenagers that have been exploited for transportation. They wanted to get to here and there, and they've been asked to, engage in things that are just unheard of, that we should not, as adults, hear these children having to engage in. And the same fact with adults too. I knew this person. I didn't ever think that in my life I would have to be carrying a price over my head for someone else's gain.
And how old were you?
Yes. So I had just graduated from Dell State and I relocated. So it was when I was 23 years old. And the idea of what it looks like, it's not, and I always say this, it's not the movie Taken. It doesn't have to happen internationally. It does affect people of color. It affects women of color greatly. It affects LGBTQ members greatly, because what they want to do is they want to coin the term of a runaway girl being in a domestic violence situation. That kind of sometimes is the umbrella, but it's not. A lot of these kids are being trafficked. Same thing with a lot of the trans community. There's a separate community that they're being exploited, and they call it trading or survival sex.
Wow.
So in this case, my podcast highlights the survivor stories so that can build awareness. So just like right now, I'm telling you all about my story so that you can learn really what it is. You see me, I feel heard. You all check out the podcast for other stories, because I have male survivors that will tell their story. I have female survivors of color that said that no one ever believed them. They were raped and molested as a child. And as we enter into Human Trafficking Awareness Month of January, I just want to thank you so much for putting me on the air. the first month of December, because there's going to be a lot of awareness out there, and I'm glad I'm able to educate your listeners, the viewers here, and through survivor stories, I believe that is the best way to really hone in. Because I know a lot of y'all watch Law and Order. I know a lot of y'all, you know what I mean? When
Yeah,
they get on the headlines,
that's
you're
true.
like, oh, shoot, what is that? Sex trafficking and the exploitation of children, including child pornography, is a billion-dollar industry.
Terrible.
There are too many people profiting off of this, and there's too many people buying these individuals as if they are just property.
Terrible.
It's terrible. It is.
You know, like you said, it's so important for us to have this conversation. I think sometimes people hear about it, they don't really understand it, or, they think like this could never happen to
Yeah.
me. And you even probably were thinking
Mhm.
that this could
Yep.
never happen to me. And
Yes.
then it happened. Talk to
Mhm.
me about, you shared a little bit in the podcast about how you were able to escape.
Yes.
You shared about your journey kind of getting back to Miami, because this situation happened in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And so once you got back to Miami and you were trying to kind of reconfigure and put your life back together or make sense of everything, where did you start?
That's a great question, because one of the things with survivors, and I know a lot of domestic violence survivors, rape survivors, we freeze and we get in a point where we won't share our story because we feel that we won't be believed.
Right.
And when I returned to Miami, I told nobody. And I didn't want to carry this as a burden. I didn't want to have this over my head, because it could have went two ways. It could have been a traumatic experience that would have put me into another lifestyle,
Right.
but it put me in a place where I started to go headfirst into this work. So my first position after I returned was actually working with the University of Delaware. They had a satellite office in Miami, actually Coral Gables, and they started a project working with sex workers. And these were African American women, the majority African American women that were in Miami-Dade County, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, freaking surviving through the streets through what they would call sex work, prostitution. And I don't want to get into it, India, but the stripper culture is a major culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this community that I was working with were on the verges of being literally homeless, disease infested, doing like $5 blowjobs, like just thrown away women, trying to still like raise kids, there's no other means of making money in their eyes. And 9 out of 10, they did not enter this life because they wanted to. And that is the number one misconception. I understand we say they're not taken, but there's some other journey and avenue.
And I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because there was a conversation I was having on Facebook maybe a couple months ago, and that was sort of the conversation about the the idea of legalizing prostitution,
Mm.
legalizing sex work, so that women can, you know, partake in this work if they so choose to. Do you believe that women choose to participate in sex work, or is it something that they are coerced into, led into, you know, kind of stolen and put into? Talk to
Yeah. I love your question, and I'm not going to have my opinion or my bias shared, but twofold answers to that. One, there are the sex work that are legal, right? The strippers, the adult escorts, the pornography. That's the sex work that I believe is legit, and they want to partake in that. They are adults. Now you have the other side where they are extremely coerced into it. I've talked to survivors, and you all will get a chance to hear from them, that they were tricked into being a stripper turned having to have to be raped continuously to benefit a pimp or trafficker. And then there's a lot of women now that are exchanging that lifestyle of drugs and life in the celebrity lifestyle, and having to make memes of it to survive. And I mean that in a way that's, I'm not trying to downplay anyone, but think about a stripper lifestyle in Miami, Florida, where you're making a whole bunch of money. The clubs are slow, and then you start getting offers to have sex for money. So now you're trying to maintain your lifestyle, and you have a trafficker or a pimp that's also benefiting from that. So that's what I don't believe in. I don't believe that that is a chosen lifestyle. I see a lot of strippers that are very artistic in their form, and I don't believe that they were coerced into that and made to do that on a daily basis to make a means to an end, right? But there are the adults that are being tricked, that have traffickers, that still have pimps, that are on the streets or making their own kind of work on the side to survive and maintain their lifestyle, whichever that is. So if you're a child, if you're under the age of 18, there is no choice. There is no such thing as a child prostitute, and there is no way that it is not a sex trafficking crime. If they are a child, you don't need to say they were tricked into believing that this person loves them. There is no way to say that they were coerced into this lifestyle. No, they are raped and they are a sex slave, and that is illegal.
Yeah, this is probably a very taboo and shocking conversation for our viewers who may be a little conservative, or this is just not something that they usually hear about,
Right.
but oh so important.
Yes.
Uh, so let's get right back into your
Yep.
story. First,
Mhm.
kind of opportunity working was with
Yes.
women who were in sex work. Kind of keep taking us through that.
Yes. So, and I do want to take a moment to just thank you, because it is such a hush hush topic. It doesn't make the headlines as if it was a murder or a missing person or a rape victim. But all of these things are happening to a sex trafficked victim.
Right.
They are constantly missing. They are potentially out there, murdered and never found, and they're constantly being raped. So I appreciate the time that you would take on your show. I know not a lot of people, it is news. It still needs to be on the news, right? It needs to make headlines. This needs to be over reported. And when I came back into Hawaii to try to work with these individuals, they didn't see that they were a victim.
Mm.
So it's very hard, like you mentioned. Some women have been brainwashed or set to believe that this is their chosen lifestyle, that this is all they have and only know what to do. And when I got away, I was spared being raped. I was spared having to turn a trick. And it all came down to family. I was recruited and sent to a room filled with two girls and the trafficker. The two women and the trafficker. The two women told me that I was going to have to turn a trick, which is learn how to be a prostitute, sex worker, what you want to call it. Um, but I used my education, and I know a lot of people say, oh, how did you get out of that? I did. I used my education. I have a degree in psychology, and I was studying people. That's what you do in psychology. I won those women over, and
Mm.
I essentially tricked them into believing that I know what I'm doing. You don't have to teach me anything. I don't have to do drugs. I don't have to be raped. What they call it is broken in. I don't need to be broken in. So let's just go about this. And I swear I will be a good sister, or I will be a good, you know, person to the trafficker.
Mm. And when you were in that situation, there were so many different cues, clues that kind of let you know, hey,
Mhm,
something isn't right here.
mhm,
For women that are watching, for men that are watching, for parents
mhm,
that are watching,
mhm,
what are some of those signs that you would indicate that people need to pay attention
mhm.
to, whether it's paying attention to their surroundings, whether it's, the conversations they're having? Talk to me about some of those things you picked up on that people need to be aware of.
Yes, thank you so much, because that's why we're doing this, right? For the awareness. Just like you said, be conscious of your surroundings. I mean, it's just really sad that we are in a society where the norm is being on our phones and being able to just talk to people. We don't really know them. You know, you really should know the people that you're engaging with. You should know, as parents, who your kids are engaging with, even if it's just a simple conversation. A simple text can say, hey, what you up to? Oh, I'm not doing anything. And that can just open up doors to learning about you. So let me go back to the psychology of it. Being a trafficker, they are smart individuals. They know the human body and brain. They know how to manipulate, and they know how to brainwash.
Mm.
So you really need to just talk to people, see people, listen to people. I can't say that enough, because not only are we being silent, this is a silent crime. You really aren't, you're really trusting individuals that you shouldn't trust. There's too much trust in people. I mean, look at what we're doing with sexting. Look what we're doing with following people and watching their daily lives. We still, that doesn't mean we know them. So my number one thing is talk to your family, talk to your friends, know numbers, don't be so naive. That really helped me a lot, is that I wasn't naive, and I was brought up knowing that you can't trust individuals, even if you think that they're looking out for you. And it's sad, because I trusted that individual from college that brought me there that day. But as soon as I didn't see him, my radar went up.
Mhm.
And as women, and I can only speak as a woman, trust your gut. You know, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it's wrong.
Right.
We have that intuition for a reason, and we don't tap into that enough. And have your power. You know your strength, you know your worth, know your power. Speak to yourself, love yourself, talk to yourself like, damn, this isn't right, or I don't deserve this. Or if you're a parent, check on your kids, because if you're not checking on them and you're not engaging in them with them, somebody else is.
Mm.
And 9 out of 10, these people don't have the best intentions. They absolutely don't.
It's very interesting that you brought up the point about trusting your intuition and trusting your gut. And I kind of want to talk about being a bystander and seeing
Yes.
something or feeling something. Let's take a look at this clip really quickly.
Let her go. What are you doing with her?
Bro, this is my sister, bro. Move.
What are you doing with her?
Bro, this is man's family, bro. Move. Are you nuts? This is man's family. Move from me, bro.
Is that the same one that just walked past us, Mum?
This is man's family, bro. Move from me.
So what are you doing in the corner with her? Are you okay? Hey, girl. Hey. Hey. I'm following you.
Look, why are you fucking stalking man, bro?
What was you doing with her? Are you okay? Do you know him?
What we just saw was two women, a mother and her child, who witnessed something strange going on. There was a man who was kind of walking with a young girl, and the young girl looked like they just looked like they didn't belong together. And so the mother was like, something doesn't feel right here. Let's follow them and see what's going on. And so he's kind of like has the girl's book bag on his shoulder. He's kind of covering her mouth, screaming or shit. And they're like, "What are you doing? doing? Where are you going? Why do you have her? Is she okay? And as they continue following him, they actually see him trying to undress her and make her perform a sexual act. They were actually able to stop it happening. The guy ended up running away. They were able to call the police. If that woman and her daughter didn't suspect something was wrong and took the extra mile to follow them, that could have been another young missing girl. That could have been one of the stories that you're talking about on your podcast. Victoria,
Absolutely.
please tell me how important it is for people, if you see something strange, speak on it.
You know, just similar to domestic violence situations, and I bring that up a lot because we're still gaining traction with being aware and intervening with that. Sex trafficking is going to be next, but right now, just like we would intervene with domestic violence situations, if you don't have the power or the confidence to intervene physically, then right, call the hotline, call authorities, make a noise, get their descriptions, kind of like see them, and make sure that they see you. I always like to make noise, or I always like to say that doesn't look right, or I am an intervener because I know working in Miami how important it is to just be seen so somebody can see you, because there's so many times when I've seen something and I call someone and they're like, oh, you should have did this, you should have did that, right? So there's a hotline. There's also the police. I know a lot of people aren't trusting in the police right now. I know it's hard. I don't want to bring that up. But if you feel like you can do something, the first thing is to make sure that you are seen and that they see that this is not okay. Get physical descriptions, whether it's a car, the person, what the girl looks like, or the youth or the boy looks like. Like you said, they were kind of changing their clothes. So facial features are important. And don't give up on what you saw, right? Don't give up. When people say, oh, it's just this or it's just that, make sure they document it. I've made so many calls to the police and they're like, oh, are you sure? And I say, listen, take this down, give me a copy so I know that I did my part and I have this documented, because that's what is being missed in all of this, is that the stories are not only not being heard, no one's writing down and nobody's making the conscious effort to put it out on the forefront. No one's saying that they saw it. The other thing is too, is that can you get someone else involved in it? So if there is someone that's nearby, maybe they can put another set of eyes on it, right? So if you and I were seeing this together and then there was another person that was like, yeah, this doesn't look right, be a strong team of people caring about this situation. The community needs to care. This is like becoming a public health crisis. Just like if there was, like I said, the domestic violence, we need to take care of each other. There's money, there's dollars going into it. The Trump administration put millions of dollars into combating human trafficking. That's a lot of resources that aren't being used because people aren't saying anything or caring about that person, and especially the people of color. It's not going to be a Caucasian man that looks weird having a teenager or a little 14-year-old African-American girl alongside them. It's going to be an African-American man and an African-American boy. And you just don't know, right? So just make a mental note or document it. You know what? He was holding on to that kid a lot. He just seemed odd. And if you don't want to intervene physically, then just document it and tell the police that. I mean, you did your part, right? And I want to bring up the male survivors, because the first situation, it also happened where I was in a group home setting, and the first kid that I became aware of that was trafficked by his mother in exchange for drugs was a boy.
Wow.
So it's happening. And if we start opening our eyes and looking and documenting it and sharing the conversations. So just like today, people will be able to check out the podcast, tell other people about the podcast, tell other people, like, you know what, today at Target, I just saw like 2 Caucasian males and they were with these kind of youth. They didn't look like they were together. The kid looked like they were unhappy, dressed inappropriately, or just very dingy and not happy. Looked like they had a few a few meals skipped, you can call the police and report it, or you can call the hotline, because the hotline will do its justice and call the police.
You
Um,
know, and some of these instances do happen in parking lots. There's a clip that I definitely want to show as well, where there is a woman who's shopping, and as she's getting groceries out of her car, two men are kind of sizing her up. One gets on one side of the car and actually gets in the back of her car. She gets in the car not knowing that he's in there, and another person gets in. They end up obviously hijacking her and driving with her in the car. Who knows what happens next?
Right. Thank you for mentioning that, because the scenarios are going to look extremely different, because it's such a heinous crime and traffickers are getting extremely smart. So we're still getting the victims that are being kidnapped. And there's that one step from being raped, unfortunately, to being trafficked, because not only are these potential traffickers, kidnapping them and raping them, now they're going to be property. So I just appreciate you bringing that up, because the scenarios can look differently. There's still the kidnappings, there's still the situation where you could be tricked into it. Yes. From dating sites. I know a lot of people aren't talking about that. But be cautious of you and you meeting people on these dating sites, because they're the ulterior, there could be ulterior motives. The other part of this is the schools and universities, right? So he knew me through the university. There's some traffickers that look out for these vulnerable girls and boys at schools and high schools, those neglected kids, the foster care kids. But I do want to say that most of the time, these traffickers know their victims. And it's not the majority of kidnappings. And if you could, find a clip, I'd ask you show that, because I think the traffickers are becoming very smart, because now that we are becoming more aware and the community members are being brave into helping their sisters and their brothers and their aunties and their uncles and their children, the traffickers are becoming smarter in their tactics. They're reaching out to family members. I've had kids come to the shelter that it was an uncle or it was a cousin, or the boyfriend had ulterior motives and groomed them for 6 months and ended up trafficking them and pimping them out after. Had a whole line of people ready to start engaging in this crime. And we unfortunately have buyers. That's where the demand is and how it makes this such a huge business. So talk to your men and women out there that are engaging in this. If you're going to go to Vegas or wherever it's legal and you're going to engage in this kind of, lifestyle, I'm not going to knock you right now. But just remember that a lot of the individuals on porn sites, those aren't always consensual. Remember, if you're going to pick up a prostitute or a sex worker on the street, they're not 100%. It's not consensual. They're being forced. If you're going to go through an escort agency, keep in mind it's not 100% consensual. If you want to hire strippers for your bachelor party, it's not 100% consensual. So if you have any morals or any ethic value or anything, and I'm talking to you men, or women, try to pick out the trusting sources, if that's even makes sense in this day and age. But if you have a moral compass in your mind, just think that not all of this is consensual. And if you don't want to be a victim or a perpetrator in this human trafficking, then just think about that, because you could potentially be raping a woman who's being forced on the streets. I could be that victim that was forced on the Vegas Strip, having to pick up clients.
This is a situation that not only affects the individual, but I'm sure their families. When we see, whether it's young girls going missing, or once they get out of these lifestyles, or when they're found, or when it's discovered that this thing has happened to them, how does it affect the entire family? How did it affect your family?
India, listen, so I did tell my family, the majority of my family on the podcast, they became very aware. they felt burdened. Okay. And that's why I try to tell this, try to get it out there now that, and I tell my kids at the shelter all the time, tell someone. They're not going to feel burdened by it. They care about you. There's a lot of aftercare and recovery programs that need to be, funded to take care of these individuals, because I have a lot of PTSD trauma. So I have a lot of trauma, right? And I'm very anxious with a lot of things. So I first tried to go to Vegas in 2014. It was my first time after a while because I was fighting not going back. And I went with some friends and I didn't have a good time. I was super vigilant. I was super anxious. I could point out a girl being forced because their weave and their hair was not like they would be if you were potentially making and keeping your own money. Their dresses did not fit. They were, and I'm sad to say, they were ashy. The shoes were overworn. And I'm just looking at this person like, they're not going to the club right now. They're not going to go through a legitimate escort agency. They're standing there on the phone and there is a pimp or trafficker nearby watching them, making sure they meet their quota every day. And a quota is they cannot go back to where they were residing or laying their head until they make that money. And it's hard for the families, because think about if you're getting out of this lifestyle and you were trafficked for 2 years or 2 months. It's hard to go back to a family that doesn't understand what happened. So it's important to hear the stories of these survivors, because they will tell you, I wish they would have just not asked me so many questions, or I wish they would have just listened to me and let me go and go cry in the corner for hours and hours, or understand that I might be very promiscuous and sexually active because that's all I know. That's all I knew for 2 weeks or 2 months. I don't know my worth, so I need to be built up again. I don't need to be torn down. So understanding and having that open communication and that just very open heart means so much, because once I did tell everyone, I got so much positive feedback that I didn't think that I would get. I thought I was going to get the, oh my God, let's go find this fool, and you need to go tell the police. You shouldn't have waited so long. But instead, I didn't get that. I got, wow, I wish I would have known. I would have been there for you. What can I do now? Is there any way that I can support you now? Is there anything that you need at the shelter? Thank you for giving back to your community and, helping them. And that's what we need to hear. There's so many survivors that are on the podcast right now, especially women of color that have wrote books, that maybe have merchandise. Buy their stuff. Like, they're making it out of this horrific situation, and they're also trying to now give back, because some of them are leading agencies. Some of them are still working with other victims and trying to get them out of, like, hey, stop stripping. Maybe we can find maybe we can find a way to get you to actually get to school and pay up whatever you were saving for.
And I commend you and each and every woman who has been brave enough to open up with the world, because it's not something that you owe anyone, but it's very appreciated, because again, it opens the eyes of those that may or may not know anything about this, and they need to know. Luckily for you, you were able to get out of that situation alive. You were able to get out of that situation untouched, though the mental scars are very real and will always be with you. Luckily enough, you were able to get out. There are some women who are not. There are some women who actually, their way of getting out is turning to other options like murder. On one of the podcast episodes, you talked about Crystal Kaiser, and most recently, the world has known about Centoya Brown. Let's talk about those stories a little bit, and the extremities of what can happen in this lifestyle when people are just trying to get out.
Yes. And it's important because it is so hard to get out. It's just like you're brainwashed. You feel like you have no worth. You don't know anything else. You may have been accustomed to that lifestyle. And that's the only attention that you get. It's just kind of like that, that domestic, when a lot of people think of this domestic violence and they're just like really hard with that I want to leave this person, but this person really loves me. The traffickers, again, they're very smart. They take time into almost grooming someone 6 to 7 more months into thinking that they love them, that they care for them, that this is a better lifestyle. And just like, the abuse that Crystal Kaiser and Centoya Brown faced as teenagers is unheard of. And they still stayed with these individuals and were continually raped and trafficked. And sometimes they feel like their only outlet is to get away from them and murder them. And that's what unfortunately happened to Randy Volar at the hands of Crystal Kaiser. So many months of continued abuse, continued neglect, PTSD. I have no value. You told false promises. Oh, I'll buy you this one day. I'll get, you can go to school one day. You can stop being raped every day. Eventually they're looking for that end goal. And once they snap, it's done. Because during these times of the victimization, they weren't truly loved. They weren't getting services. They weren't even taken care of medically. There's so many women and girls that are continually being raped and trafficked that they still have to live through pregnancies, miscarriages, sexually transmitted diseases. And again, if there wasn't a demand and these people weren't buying these individuals, I think there could have been another scapegoat, another end goal. And just like you mentioned, they're going to crimes to get out. These people are suffering in prisons and institutions because of the victimization, and all of this stuff that happened to them. There's so many of the survivors that, or should I say victims, that aren't surviving in their mind right now, let alone thriving. They're in mental hospitals because of the PTSD. They're in jails because of the crimes that they committed. Some of the traffickers wouldn't even be touched or arrested because the victims would. They'd take the fall for it. They'd get robbery charges, theft charges, assault charges, repeated runaway as far as the kids were. And this whole time that they were being trafficked, they weren't seen. The police officers were seeing the crimes more than they were seeing the actual victimizations. For Centoya Brown's situation, it took her so many years to tell people that she was in fear of her life, that she didn't want to be raped again by a grown-ass man that had a weapon beside them. They're not able to protect themselves. Same thing with Crystal Kaiser. She wanted to end this whole travesty of being raped all the time because he was setting up dates for her and she had nothing in return. She wanted to trust him, but he was another person who, drugs, alcohol, continuously abusing me. There's no outlet. There's no end. That's so much suffering that unfortunately the help that they didn't get seen turns into having to take care of it themselves.
When you first started, you said this wouldn't be happening if there wasn't a demand. For people that aren't a part of this life, but they want to help, they want to do something about it. What can people do to stop this from happening? I know you can't stop it overnight or stop everything.
Yeah.
What can people
You know what? And I don't want to get emotional. I always get emotional, and you'll see that I get emotional in my episodes because it's endearing to know that people like yourself, channels and platforms like yourself, give us the time of day, right? You could be talking about anything right now, but you're talking about this and you're making people feel heard. My story matters. 15 years later, I'm able to now feel like I have value, that people are saying, wow, you could have been trafficked. Yeah, I wasn't unfortunately, I wasn't the white girl going to Europe that their father cared about them. I was a 23-year-old college graduate, living it up in Miami, coming to Philly for a job, a gig, potentially being sold into slavery, sex slavery at that. So you and all the other people that have avenues and platforms to share and talk about this, please talk about it. Please do. If you're an educator or if you're in a school or university and you want something to raise awareness on, pick January, Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Pick a speaker to come to your institution. pick domestic violence in October and pick an institution to, or a speaker to come to your organization with. And then just kind of like support the agencies. If you want to donate to, or if you donate to Goodwill or Salvation Army or all these other nonprofits and all these other good causes, think of sex trafficking. Think about that girl or that boy who has finally got out of the life and they're in my shelter and they have no resources. They're, they are in foster care and they are looking for a foster home to go into. Tap into your strengths. Do you own a business? Is your business willing to donate to these individuals? Every state has a nonprofit that aids into trafficking because it happens everywhere. Right. It really does. And just you caring, just you listening, just you supporting, and we don't benefit from movies like Taken, but there are other movies like Stop Trafficking. There are documentaries. And sometimes watching those films and being aware makes it count. It matters. It really does. It makes us feel like our life matters.
If there was somebody that wanted to get into this line of work, wanted to help fight for survivors, could you talk a little bit about what that process would look like? And what are some of the things they could expect to be doing in this line of work?
I love that. I've had 3 interns so far at my shelter. So we have a lot of nonprofits that are willing to take volunteers and interns in their organization. And it's literally from administrative work to, if your strength is, look, I know how to go out there and start rescuing people, or I want to manage their caseload, and I want to adopt an agency and be able to provide toiletries or clothing for these individuals. You can do that. And how I got into the field is I literally looked for positions. There's outreach where it's like, hey, you might be in this life right now. There might be a trafficker right down the street. Let me give you some condoms. Let me give you some baby wipes. Let me give you some shampoo and conditioner. Whatever your strengths is, definitely tap into it. And I want to go back to what you were saying about the demand. The demand is essentially, there shouldn't be such a high case of people wanting to buy sex. Okay. I know it's hard to say. It's a lot of people that, there's all of these pornography channels, websites, and there's OnlyFans, and, sex sells. But, you could be talking to your uncle or or a male friend or somebody that's like, dude, it ain't that, it's 2020. Stop going out to Vegas thinking you need to buy sex. Stop, going into these, these different platforms. There's a lot of it in the dark web and there's a lot online I don't want to talk about, but don't be that person who's buying sex. Stop.
Buying people.
You're buying people. You're buying people. We're not property. I should not have been recruited from a college peer and had a price over my head. I don't know what my fee was. To this day, it bothers me that I know that he got money in exchange of recruiting me to this trafficker.
Why have you never spoke on his name, on the individual's name?
That's a good question, because when I started the podcast, a lot of people that heard my story that knew me in college, they know this person. And even the guy that rescued me, he came on the podcast, and I could talk about him, Jerry Jake Williams. He came on the podcast and told his story because he didn't know either 15 years later that I was telling my story. And a college friend of mine actually figured out who it was. And she actually had a picture and said, Victoria, is this him? And I said, it is him. And she's just like, we need to do something about it. I'm still struggling to this day, whether I want to put it out there, confront him, or seek justice in that way. I think right now I'm still at the point where my story being told and believed means so much more than seeing him get in trouble for this. And I had one person that was close to me say, you don't know what he was up against that time either. Maybe he had to produce another female to maybe get a family member that was in it out of it. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen, like, you can't leave this life until you give me someone else of value. I don't know, and I don't know why I'm still feeling those feelings, but I did engage with this individual. He was a college friend. And I think that that's going to be one part of my journey, that if I continue to get people like you that actually care about this as much as I care about it, maybe it will bring my silence to an end. Just like the victims of Harry Weinstein and Bill Cosby, they finally come forward, and Jeffrey Epstein, because maybe it takes the community to uplift me and say, girl, get that man in trouble. I wonder where he is right now. He could be trafficking and recruiting people. He could be a bona fide trafficker, pimp right now. We don't even know.
If he stumbled across this video, is watching this right now,
don't do it, India.
What would you want to say?
You know what? I would say, hear my story, hear from my viewpoint. I don't know where your life is right now, but you did not win. I got away that night. I don't know if something happened to you. I don't know if you did this again to somebody else. I don't know if you are still doing it, but you need to stop. You deserve to be in a whole jail cell. You need to be educated on what you really got yourself into that time, but I know you did not win, and I'm still saving people because of you. I am now a voice for other survivors because of you, and I thank you for that, but I'm not going to put what I wish would happen to you or what did happen to you out there. I just hope that if you come across this and you are aware, listen to my story, listen to what you did, and stop. Stop whatever it is that you're doing, whether you are victimizing other females or males, whether you're in this lifestyle, or maybe you're on drugs, or maybe you act like you that even never happened. Just stop. Just stop. See me and listen to me. This is what you did. A good story that could have been bad. Get help. Like, dude, I don't know what your life is like right now, but you seriously need help. Seriously. Yeah.
Glad you got that out.
Thank you. This means a lot. I didn't think I was gonna.
You being here means this moment means a lot. I'm getting emotional. Wow.
Yeah. You know, and I probably said it like 4 or 5 times, India. You having this platform, I feel so heard and I feel so seen, that I know that there's other people that need to be here where I am. So if you ever get anyone else that wants to tell their story, whether it's a domestic violence story, a rape story, they got away from a kidnapping, or, being exploited, please give them this avenue to share their story, because I know you and I are connected, but they are as deserving. And if you want to tell your story, please hit us up on Unseen TTT podcast at Gmail, and just know that we will give you that platform. It could be anonymous. You don't have to be even seen on the video, but I will tell you, 15 years later, I am more free. And I feel like it needed to be let go. It needs to be gone. It needs to be released, the burden. You need to be set free.
I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough, Victoria. Thank you for coming on here. This was more than I expected, and certainly, like we said, necessary. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too, and I really hope the community is more aware through this story, and for you putting this out there. There's a National Human Trafficking Hotline if anybody sees anything, if they have to report a tip, or if you are in the moment of like, I need to learn more about this because I need to do something, they have a lot of websites and resources on their website also.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to connect with you so we can put some of that information in the description of this episode as well.
Perfect.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
And thank you so much to all of you for watching this episode of Up with India. Of course, for more news updates and information, I will be back this week with more shows. Thank you so much for watching.